full trust present. And if Town of Harwich is channel 18, if you can go ahead and hit the record button, and then I'll make sure to hit turn record off when we go into executive session.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Seeing as it's just after 1 o'clock on Monday, January 31st, 2022, I'll hereby call the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust meeting to order. We'll do roll call because we're remote. Joe Powers, Chair. Don, you'd be next as Vice.
Don Howell, Vice Chair.
Larry.
Larry, I'm present.
Brendan.
Brophy, Larry Brophy.
Brendan, we've got you on mute still.
Brendan.
Brendan Lowney, present.
Great, thanks, Brendan. And Judith? Judith, it looks like you're back on mute. I still can't hear you. Judith, do you want to?
Judith Underwood, present.
There we go. Thank you, Judith. So we have full trust represented. I had received a request a few weeks back from.
To leave them unmuted. I just thought it'd be.
So Judith, your audio is all choppy.
Can you hear me now? No.
I think so. And to your question, yes, I was going to mute everybody to start. For the trust members that are on, if you want to give a wave, I'll say your name and then you can unmute yourself and we'll go from there if that works for everybody. All right, thank you. All right, so I started to say the first item under new business is a discussion with representatives from the Adult Shared Living of Harwich Corporation. As you may recall from past discussions, that's Jeff Locantori and his colleagues regarding adult shared living in Harwich. I don't see that they've joined us yet, so we can go back to that topic. Should they join us a little bit later in the meeting? I figured the next item then we can go into, I'm going to take everybody off mute all as far as the trust members. And it was really meant to be a discussion on the trust now and where we see ourselves going over the coming months of 2022. We have 2 applications in for CPC that we can discuss. There's, as I've told you before, through the town, there's going to be an article related to a housing advocate position to build off of what we've used as a part-time housing coordinator. And then some of the other topics in this agenda, as you can see there as it relates to the housing production plan, the affordable housing plan, the potential grants that I've become aware of, and just how we want to move forward on things like that. This agenda topic was meant to be broad and encompassing. All right. So with that, I will take the trust members off mute, open it up for discussion, and we can go from there. Actually, Don, you're off. I think you folks are going to have to do it yourself. I don't think GoToMeeting allows me to unmute anymore. So if the trust members could unmute. And having said that, somebody's just joining. Hi, who just joined, please?
Jeff.
Jeff Locantori? Is that Jeff Locantori from Adult Shared Living of Harwich? All right, Jeff, if that's you, we're not able to see you or hear you. We're gonna go to our item B, and we can come back to you if you're able to connect to the meeting. Trust members, again, we're going back to item B, and hopefully your microphones are live, and we can get into our discussion. Don, did you want to start?
I'd rather lay back and see what the rest of the trust is interested in.
Brendan, Larry, or Judith? Brendan, go right ahead.
So maybe one of the things we can discuss is, I think we mentioned this before in other meetings, is take a look at the properties we have and either delegate, assign tasks for that. I think that would be a good start, just to go through the properties we have and see where we're at. You know, for example, Oak Street, we talked about moving forward with Bowler, and the benefits of that is maybe it can go to Jeff, who joined us today. You know, it could go to someone like that, or we could sell that property depending on, is it viable for just a 1 or 2 bedroom house, or is it viable for, 4 or 5 bedrooms? So that's just one example. Maybe just break down the properties and, like 2 or 3 minutes on each one, just to get a sense of where we're at.
Brendan, let me jump on that one and say, first of all, thank you. And that's also a reminder. I believe Ellen reached out to trust members who are in the Commonwealth. The Board of Selectmen executed the 6th property, which I believe was a Depot Street property. And I think Ellen was reaching out to you folks. So we know that that property has been added to the mix. To my understanding, and working with Katie Klein at KP Law, the only outstanding property is the one related to Sisson Road, and outstanding questions on that one. So Brendan, to your point, we should have at least the vast majority of the properties that were transferred or voted to be transferred through town meeting.
Great.
So we have Jeff Locantori on. Do we want to go back to item A? All right. Good afternoon, Jeff. Can you hear me? I think I see Janet over to your left shoulder. If you folks can hear us. Jeff, I think you're live.
Can
Can you hear
everybody
somebody?
hear me?
There we go, Jeff. We can hear you loud and clear. Good afternoon. We can hear you. Can you hear us? Jeff or Janet, can you hear us? Trust members, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So for representatives of Adult Shared Living, your mic is live. We could hear you a moment ago. We can see you. Can you see and hear us?
Speak up if you can.
Jeff or Janet, can either of you hear us? All right, so folks, we're going to have to go back through our agenda. We'll try you again a little bit later in the meeting. Again, your mic indicates that it's live. We could hear you a moment ago. We can see you.
Yep.
Thank you, Don. Yep.
Can't see this, sorry.
All right, so we'll go back into the rest of the agenda. Item B, as Brendan was saying, so we can go through the properties that the trust now does have. Oh, there we go, folks. We can hear you. Can you hear us? We can hear you, Jeff and Janet. Please go ahead.
Doesn't look like they're getting audio from us.
Right.
Good afternoon, Joe.
Hey, Jeff, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Good, how are you?
All things considered, not bad. Good to have you on with us.
Good to have you. We've been very busy the last 2 months. We have been to a meeting where, all the groups met together. You had sent Megan into that meeting. And we got quite a bit of good information from the planning board, the Conservation Commission, and remind me what other board was there.
So typically with community development, you would have been with health, planning, conservation, building.
Health and building were there.
Great.
We've got an engineer on board now, coastal engineering out of Orleans. I spoke to Tara last week and I'm waiting for a phone call back. We got an estimate we got two different prices from Avalon Building Systems. And we're going to go with the lower of the two prices and do a lot of the legwork ourselves. I do want to let you know that Jonathan did decide to go elsewhere. So it's me running this with a fantastic board. So we're working diligently to get things rolling the way we want to do it. And we definitely plan to be there for town meeting in May. And we're still looking at the Oak Street property over by Cranberry Valley Golf Course.
Thank you, Jeff. Do you still have your community preservation article going through CPC?
Yes, sir.
All right. Have they taken any votes on that yet?
I do not know.
Okay, I know they have a meeting coming up, so I can reach out to the chair of that committee to see where they're at.
Okay.
And then just say to the trust very quickly what Jeff was making reference to is he and his organization met with representatives of the town's community development group, which again is building, planning, health, and conservation. I know Selectman and Trust Member Don Howell. Don, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, do you have any idea yet, having met with some of the regulatory people, of just what you can build there? Because first of all, you don't have the property under your jurisdiction, and we would be interested in knowing what you would build there.
They told us a single-family dwelling.
So how many bedrooms?
That's what the engineer needs to figure out for us.
John, did you have any more comments or questions for Jeff?
No, largely driven by those regulatory boards, what would be allowed to happen. And you can't waive 40B would get rid of site coverage, but it wouldn't do anything at all for Board of Health requirements and CONSCOM requirements. That's why I'm kind of interested in what it is that's possible to be done with it.
Thank you, Don. Brendan?
So to answer Don's question, I think it really goes to the engineer. I mean, if Jeff wanted to pursue hiring Coastal, it was something we were going to discuss where Bowler Engineering gave us a proposal back in 2019 for that property. And, you know, whether how it's zoned, what you put there, yes, a residential property, but you have to see if, you know, if the land is viable, whether it's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 bedroom. So that still has to be defined. And that's what something we were going to talk about as we list through the properties. So good exercise. So whether Coastal did it or Bowler, it'd be the same thing.
I guess I was just cautioning before a lot of money changes hands here that you need to have some clarity because, Jeff, you don't have jurisdiction over the property yet. It's still the trust's property.
That's correct.
Right. So we could recommend, or as we go through our, you know, we can actually bring Bowler back to the table or Coastal. The Affordable Housing Trust would pay for it. Find out if it is a 1 or 4 bedrooms. And we can offer, if it is something that Jeff can use, we could offer it that way. And maybe we get reimbursed for the money we put out for the survey of the land. But that's something we could work out the smaller details, you know, and how we give the land to them as well. So that step has to be done before anything. Now, let's say it's only a 1 bedroom. This is more of a, not so much for Jeff, but for the housing trust. Then we could probably take a step back and say, all right, maybe this is a piece of land that we should sell because we can't develop it. So by getting the engineer, we have 2 options. Obviously, help working with Jeff sounds very attractive. And then if not, it would be a piece of property we could sell.
Thank you, Brendan. Judith, I think you had your hand up at one point. Judith, your audio is not coming through on my end. Judith, it went live momentarily, but we'll come back to you. Larry, did you have any comments or questions?
Well, Brendan said, I'd just be replicating Brendan.
All right. What is the preference of the trust for next steps regarding adult shared living? If anyone has either a statement they want to make or a motion they want to make for consideration.
Would it be appropriate to make a tabling motion now until we get the information, Mr. Chairman?
So right now, the agenda item is simply a discussion. So we could table that, or we could just agenda it for a future meeting. We don't have to go through the procedures, given that it's not an action item yet.
Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I'm with Brendan. I think the next action step is to get in touch with Bowler and or Coastal and see when we could get them in to talk to us.
So Jeff and Janet, you've hired Coastal Engineering for your project. Go ahead, Jeff.
Would the board like me to reach out to Tara from Coastal Engineering and see if she would be willing to work with the town of Harwich? I'm willing to do that.
Sure. I think in the short term, what the trust is saying is we have our next regular meeting on February 28th,
Yes.
same time. So if you wanted to come back with representatives from Coastal Engineering, we can continue the discussion to build off of what members Lowney, Brophy, and Howell were saying. And I know Judith gave a thumbs up, so she's on that as well. So yeah, if you want to connect with them and have them come back at our next meeting, we could probably continue the discussion.
Is it going to be a virtual or is it going to be in person?
My hope it's going to be in person, but events are beyond my control, so that's going to be a closer to game time decision.
Okay.
But preference will always be for in-person meetings.
Okay. Good enough.
Thank you. Judith, did you want to try again? So it's something I wouldn't normally do at a public meeting, but I think given the exigencies, Judith, the chat feature is open. We'll try that. We're recording the meeting. So if you want to do put comments in chat, I can at least utter them on your behalf onto the record. Unless there's objection from the trust. All right, here we go. So Judith's saying, for clarity, does what Brendan said mean we will in this coming month have the engineering done before the next meeting? So go ahead, Brendan.
So I know that I would think not. We would still have to have Bowler revise their quote from 2019.
Exactly what Brendan said, and then
Sorry, who was that?
So
I heard
so
something, but I couldn't get. Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, so I think maybe it's just better. Like I said, we talk about the properties we have as one of the action items for Oak Street. It might be having Bowler revise their proposal from 2019. Maybe someone from the trust getting in touch with Coastal and asking them for a proposal, very similar to what Bowler did for us. This way we'll have two proposals. Wouldn't be a bad thing.
Brendan, can you just give me some clarity on when you're saying a bowler, is that B-O-L-L-E-R? And can you just,
B-O-H-L-E-R.
can you just give a little more information? I'm not familiar with bowler.
B-O-H-L-E-R.
Yep. So Bowler here, they're the ones who originally, can't even get that. They originally did the proposal in 2019 for Oak Street. So we have a proposal which will do the boundaries, topography, utility survey, conservation, wetlands delineation. They gave us a proposal. It was roughly $13,000. I think it would be just a phone call to ask them to revise it, if they're still interested in doing so. And if Jeff has already made headway with Coastal, that'd be great to get in touch with them too, so we can get two quotes on the engineering of the property. But rather than waiting for next meeting for Jeff to bring Coastal, because it sounds like they're interested in the project, why not just ask them for a proposal? And we can at least have both of those next meeting and see what the costs are, and then we could take a vote.
Judith says that was the answer to her question. Jeff, before you go, I just wanted to ask. So, Brendan, I have the information or the name. Thank you. But I just did a search on our network drive for all the files that I have access to. And the only bowler proposal I have is a septic proposal regarding Sisson. Is
Yeah,
that
I've got
something you? All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Don, excuse me, Jeff, and if that's okay, Don. Jeff, go ahead.
Joe, just so you got everybody's aware, Coastal, it did take them time to call me back, so it might be done in a month, it might not be done in a month. You know, I just don't want to say, yes, it would be done in a month when there's a possibility it's not going to be.
So then, Jeff, if I may, for Brendan, I think what the trust is saying is the trust had an engineering firm known as Bowler produce a report back in 2019 regarding one of the properties that the trust may be considering disposing of with you folks. So the trust can have that discussion at our meeting on February 28th. If you're able to add to it on the 28th, go right ahead. If you need more time, let us know. But I think what I'm hearing from the trust members is there's some legwork that we can do on our part regarding those potential properties. Brendan, did I capture that remotely close?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Jeff, did that help you?
Yes, it does.
Great. Thank you. Larry, did you have your hand up?
No,
All set? Dawn or Judith?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, what I'm trying to ask is to placeholder here for when we go back to item B. It just seems to me we need a bigger discussion of this. You had alluded to something last week that stuck in my mind, and now this Bowler thing. I think all the trust members had the assumption that record keeping, especially when Chris was around, was being done, and that things were being preserved, and everything was going through the CDP with Andrea Aldano. So if we don't have it resident in our file system, we may want to make a run at them and ask them what files they have for that period of time, because I know I wasn't keeping files because I wasn't in a position to do that, and I'm not sure anybody else was. It seems to be the most file-ready person on the trust, but again, I didn't think it was our responsibility going back at that point.
No, I think it's point well taken that we can certainly go dive deeper into on the next agenda topic. For this particular discussion, though, I'd say just be mindful that all I did presently was a search for Bowler, Bohler, and that's all I came up with. I can try to refine those searches, but the point's still well taken. To Selectman Howell, we can delve into that deeper on item B and reach out to our former vendors for certain. For Jeff and Janet, was there anything else you wanted to bring to the attention of the trust?
I don't have anything else. Oh, Joe, there actually is. I take that back. We signed I signed the first contract of many with Avalon Building Systems. Is there any way that we could get the cost of the permits and the inspections covered by the town of Harwich, because we're a nonprofit organization?
So I believe generally the answer is yes, and I might have to defer to the members of the Board of Selectmen. There is a process, I think, by where fees can be waived, but Don, can you speak to that?
Yeah, that is not a direct fee from us. That's why I've dwelled on the who has jurisdiction problem. If we were to contact somebody or contract with somebody, then it's easy enough to do. But Jeff, they're actually, if I'm not incorrect, they're actually engaged in a proposal to create a site plan, right? The builder?
From the engineer or the builder?
The builder is what you're talking about, right?
I'm talking about the building plan. You know, the building permits.
Yeah, Jeff was just talking about the fees that the building department would issue. So, I mean, that's something, the building department can give you that's based on, I think it's the size or per thousand, depending on how they price it out. So I would connect with the building department on that. And then whether there's any thing the Board of Selectmen can do to waive the fees, I'm sure that's something that can be.
There's a fee that the planning board has too for an application
Correct.
fee, which I believe is separate from the building department.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Jeff, have you laid that money out yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, that's down the road because we're still considering what to do with the property, and then you well may wind up being that what we focus on, but we haven't gotten to that point yet, so there aren't any fees that are imminently going to be collected.
Okay.
So I think, Jeff, you have your answer in the short term, that the town can consider that at the appropriate time. But I also think from the trust, don't think you have to shell out any money to the town yet. And if you're advised to do so, you can certainly give me a call because I think that's not the time yet.
Okay.
So, all right, hope that helped.
Okay. Yes, it does.
And then for the trust generally, sorry, Jeff, anything else beyond the
Nope.
permit fee? All right. So then for the trust, I think what we're hearing is that at our February 28th meeting, I will hopefully have made contact with Bowler to get an updated report regarding the Oak Street property. And the board, the trust can have a discussion on that at its meeting on the 28th and with representatives from Bowler. Jeff, if you and Janet have made headway with your engineering firm, just tell you that you'd want to be alerting Danielle and Ellen and administration the week before the scheduled meeting if you have anything to come before the trust.
Okay. We would like to be, at the trust meeting the next time around. That
Sure.
way we, if there's any new updated information to give you folks, we're able to give it to you.
Very good. We'll continue this discussion on February 28th and we'll stay in touch.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Janet. Take care.
You too.
Judith, I'm just going to do a quick mic check. Any luck, do you know, on your microphone? Otherwise, we can continue the mechanism of chat. All right, I think we're still using chat then.
You want to try using the computer's own mic and speaker?
Unmuted.
Still no luck. I'll return us back to item B, and I think Selectman Howell, if you want to pick up where you left off. Certainly when you're talking about records and all that, again, while we were talking about the other item, I did a search on Oak Street. As you can imagine, I came back with a number of different results, but nothing that jumps out as being specific to the properties that town meeting authorized be conveyed to the trust.
Yeah, and that was my point. There's more than just that, too, as we discussed a week ago. So I'm interested in seeing if we could get back to Andrea, because anything that was done on the contract was done as an agent of the town. So it's really our data and our documentation.
Just making notes on that. I can absolutely do that. And for me, for the discussion item, the reason I put that on there in the manner in which I did is Judith, are you trying to communicate? We still can't hear you, or I still can't hear you. Okay, have you dialed in already? Can you hear us?
What's the prompt, Joe? Is it *6? Or?
*6 to unmute, correct. Thank you, Don. I
Can you
just
hear
don't
me
see.
now?
There we go. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Judith. We can hear you loud and clear.
Sorry about that.
Nope, quite all right. Glad we had a solution, and I'm just ducking under my camera to turn off the chat function so we can now get back into a proper board meeting discussion, a trust meeting discussion. So the reason why I put it on the agenda in that manner is it's just a reminder that I know you folks have been at this since inception, and I know you know that I have not been. And so as you're talking about things, I would just encourage you to assume I know nothing or I know very little. Like I said, Brendan, for Bowler, I'm familiar with a preliminary septic review they did, but nothing related to those other properties. And with regard to those other properties, my level of understanding was simply that town meeting voted in 2019 to convey them. So I'm not aware of any specifics. So if you come up with anything, if you can give me as much information as possible, and then Don, to your point, I'll still do a search of the network, but I'll also do a search of our hard files. I believe Ellen did say that there is a trove of trust documents that she discovered in one of the other cabinets. So we may have things in hard copy form. But for the trust, I just ask you to bear with me and just be as descriptive as possible. Chances are I'm not aware of what you're talking about unless I've stumbled upon it myself or if I've already been working on it. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment because I think that's part of the problem here is that we had the assumption that you had your hands on a file somewhere that because you were not aware of a lot of this stuff, like the Jan Golson stuff. And yet I know that we had them in agenda packets, and I know that they were part of agenda meetings when the CDP was our technical assistants and Chris was still around. So there should be like a trove of documents somewhere.
Um,
I would agree. Judith, go ahead.
I'd be happy to take some time and go through all our emails since we formed and put together everything electronic that we have, and get that to you in a box format or something, a Gmail drive or something. That would be helpful.
So we could certainly work with you on a thumb drive or something of that nature if that works. I just did, just as an example, I just did another search, and under Oak Street property, let me just share the screen real quick, because you folks will probably recognize it, but I will emphasize that that PowerPoint slide is all that comes up with regard to Oak Street properties. So a helpful image, but not much else that I can draw on. So that's sort of where I think we're at right now in the administration department. Hope I didn't lose you folks. There we go, back. Brendan, go right ahead.
So real quickly, in the agenda packets, I mean, I know it's tough to search through them all, but all the information that's actually been provided, any printed material would be in all of those. I mean, that's how I source some of my stuff. And I also keep, folders and all the properties, but it's all there. We just have to find it. That's the whole trick. With Bowler, for example, I don't think we need to find the original document. I think we just need to call them. Just a simple step. We don't need to find stuff. I think we just need to call them.
Well, what would be helpful for me is knowing what I'm talking about when I call them. So that's why,
Well,
Yep.
that's what I meant about each property assigning someone to maybe spearhead it. So if any of the board members are passionate about Sisson Road, let's find someone who really passionate about that. Oak Street, we can go through these properties and see what's going on. I understand, and then report back to you, Joe. We could do that. I just think might be thinking too hard. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out.
No, I think that's a better approach. We just had a discussion with an interested party on a property. and you folks have some background on it. I would welcome any of you, and I think I know who the volunteer might be on that one. So if there's somebody on trust that wants to call specific to the Oak Street property that may be beneficial for adult shared living, I for one say go ahead, have at it. And if you want it on the agenda for the 28th, give me about a week's notice and we'll keep moving. And then for the meeting on the 28th, we can identify specifically the parcels and divvy them up that way if that also works. Don?
Yeah, might I suggest this moving forward, because I like what Brendan's saying, and I largely did that in the prior year. However, two things. Number one is that if we get a little carried away, we have to be mindful that we don't want to commit the town to paying for vendor services that were not really procured right. So that leads to number two. We really need to be on board at a meeting that, Brendan, you go ahead and do this thing with that property so that everybody is aware of, you know, who's being assigned what, and there's some sort of delineation of authority that flows back to the town. Because every phone call to like a lawyer costs money.
Yeah.
I don't want to see us getting involved with phantom invoices starting to arrive.
Right. So and Don, I agree with that. I think it could be just as simple as assigning someone. And let's just talk about, can we just take Oak Street as something to talk
Yeah.
about, to check it off the list?
Yep.
So a property like Oak Street, maybe the goal for next meeting is to get 2 new proposals from engineers. We already have Bowler, who could hopefully, if they're interested, to revise it, and Coastal. I personally think it might be a challenge to get those in a month from them, and they're going to be maybe 2, 3, 4 months out before they can even do the project. So just to put that in perspective, at least the ball is rolling on that property. And that's the simplest task that we need to do for that. We don't have to really overthink that. Get the 2 proposals, and then we can have a longer discussion of what to do with the proposals. So let's say we get the 2, we go with, let's say we use Bowler, we're going to go with Bowler. And the reason why we're going to be maybe doing that, and this could be a longer discussion, is that A, we get to see what that property can yield. It can yield a 1-bedroom or 4-bedroom. And then maybe we can go to the adult shared living and say, write a, something up for them to come in on that property. I think it's that simple. Or we could sell it if it's only deemed for just a 1-bedroom, because that really wouldn't be conducive developing a 1-bedroom property with any kind of money. So I think that's where we're at with that. Larry?
I agree with that, Brendan. And Joe, I think another thing that we should, as we work along with Jeff and his group, we should let them know that if we're going to be spending, or if they're going to spend I don't think they understood that $13,000 will be the evaluation of the engineering evaluation. And we're not going to just drop $13,000 every time somebody comes in to get the septic work done. Jeff really ought to know that if they get that, they have an implicit understanding that they're going to be paying for it. I mean, yes, we can waive the fees, but I don't think we're going to be waiving $13,000 engineering fees. I mean, that's something that's a very real cost, along with the cost of the land. I mean, they're talking about an amount of money that comes up to well over 6 figures. And we can certainly use that money. We can certainly use the $13,000 someplace over on the Marceline property. I would suggest, and I bet Don is nodding his head. Yeah, we can probably use 13 grand. We can probably use 130 grand.
Right, and that will be something for us to discuss, and how are we giving the properties, are we leasing the properties, and we could do an RFP for any of that later on. Or I think we could work directly with the adult shared living guys and say, here's where we're at. And maybe we do make a contingent on getting those service fees back. Or maybe we agree together just to, it's such a good project that we can waive those fees. But that could be a decision down the road. But either way, we still have to get an engineering report. Like you can't, so in other words, and you can talk to a real estate broker, I'm sure, you just can't sell a piece of land. You have to probably have it surveyed before you sell it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's if it's just land. If there's a house already on it, it most likely has a site plan. We have no site plan, no delineation of any wetlands or boundaries. That all has to be sorted out before you could sell a viable piece of land. So
As
either
well
way,
as-
we need to do that step.
as well as, we've got to have a plan of subdivision, a registrable instrument at the Registry of Deeds to take to the planning board. That costs money too. So these are not insignificant things that we're going to waive a fee on.
Judith?
And through you, Joe, could Brendan, just for the general public, just talk a little bit about timelines, realistic timelines these days, and like, for example, getting engineers, and why it doesn't happen in a week, why it might take a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, just construction alone, to get anything surveyed, you know, from my experience, because I recently have done it, my own personal property, and they're months out on getting the services done. I don't want to, scare anyone not to come to the table on that, but maybe Coastal is an option that wants to do it right away. Maybe Bowler, but I wouldn't know those exact details. But it takes a month to get a permit, go through the planning process. Most of my customers that are building new homes, that could be a real process. So it's got to take some time. Whatever we do, whether it's Sisson Road or the Marceline I mean, we could be years away, but like I said, it's important to get the ball rolling because every meeting counts. And I think that's what we feel like those are the roadblocks we're coming into. So if we just move the ball along, we'll be in better shape. So just making this one easy decision gets us one step closer on Oak Street.
Well, I need to temper everyone's mindset, though. I don't know that it's easy. It may be simple. And the reason why I say that I don't know that it's easy, to Judith's question, whatever the marketplace, and Brendan, that's what I take your expertise on. You're talking about the marketplace for construction and land use anyway. This trust is a subset of the body politic known as the town. And the trust as the town is subject to the procurement process. And so to use some examples of our conversation, yes, we can call Bowler or someone can contact Bowler. But if the dollar amount exceeds $10,000, we can't call Bowler. We then have to solicit 3 quotes because it's more than $10,000. Larry, you would use an example about $13,000 for something. For better, for worse, that translates into my mind of under 10,000 best practices. So for the procurement team, and Don knows that's basically me and Megan, for the procurement team, that's easier to do. If we think the value of what we're looking to obtain, and this would, in the one instance for Bowler, for that one property, if we think that's under $10,000, that's an easy procurement because I will make the statement as the chief procurement officer that the sound business practice is to rely upon the last expert that we relied upon. So if it's less than $10,000, it's easy to get Bowler under invoice. If it's 10 to 50,000, it becomes a little bit more involved. And if it's over 50,000, it's a much longer process because the trust is the town and the town has to adhere to all those procurement procedures. So that's the wet blanket part of it. Specifically to Oak Street, if any of you folks have a feeling that what we're contemplating from Bowler is going to be in that first category, then that's something that I can expedite. If we think it's in the second category where most of procurement falls anyway, I also have to put out there, despite the fact that I'm a member and the chair of this group, that has to go into the overall queue that we have for procurement. And there's no longer a backlog, but there's a log there. And, we'd have to insert it in its proper place. So Megan and I might be looking at a month out from a $10,000 to $50,000 procurement. Don?
Yeah, in the interest of getting this ball rolling here, and this would probably be the template for future things to do. If we're going to designate Brendan as the point person for that property, instead of wasting time going back and forth between he calls Bowler and Bowler tells him something bad, then he's got to contact your office. Why wouldn't we, as a task, because we can't do this, it has to be through you, assign Megan and he to make the call jointly to them to ascertain what our obligations are going to be.
I would agree with that. That's essentially what I was intimating generally. My point on that is I can absolutely assign Megan as the second part of procurement to work with a member of the trust. My point is we are dealing with, I'm going to hazard a guess right now, of at least 10 to 15 either solicitation for quotes, RFPs, or in some cases bids.
We're not at
So
the RFP level though at that point. If Brendan and she make a call and we're able to lock in that we're talking $9,999 or less, then that allows Brendan to proceed forward. It does not have to go in the queue. But like I said, I think we could cut 2 to 4 weeks out of this if it starts with both of them.
I don't disagree. I was happier with the fact that it's all agreed that Brendan's going to be the lead on this one.
I second that.
Very good. Unanimous consent. But to that overall concept and to Brendan's earlier statement, we have other pieces of property that the trust now is in possession of, or is in theoretical possession because we have executed deeds or one more deed to be executed. We all know what the deeds are, even though they're not on the agenda. Do any of you want to look at those properties and pick one off and say that you'll take it and analyze it and report back? Because I think that was a great idea that was brought up earlier by Brendan. Or do we want to wait on that exercise until February?
It's
What
kind
is
of a
the-
surprise. I think we might want to actually ponder that so that we can give some sort of wish list from each of us.
All right. So
Yeah, I think it was a good exercise to run through Oak Street, right? So maybe next meeting we should really hit all those and bring all your thoughts. Like Sisson Road, I know we don't have it yet officially from the town. There's been RFPs created, templates for that property. Bowler has a site plan that they've already done. So, I'm sorry, septic site plan, I believe. So yeah, it'd be nice to be ready for next meeting on all those. So bring your notes and thoughts, and like we just did Oak Street, I think let's do each property and we'll have an understanding. And that will help us with our housing plan moving forward.
thank you, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want Joe to run around though panicking about documentation for certain things. We all know, but he doesn't. The Sisson Road property was MHP mostly doing things with their contracting authority. They had an engineer come in that was looking at the soil consistency for whether it could sustain the foundations without erosion. And so part of the documentation would reside with them, and you would not have anything inside of town hall. That gets back to Laura Schufelt with that particular property.
Okay. Any other general topics under the item B? I do have a less general topic under item B that I want to bring up, but anybody else have any thoughts on our trust activities going forward? Don?
Yeah, I just want to lay it out there because there isn't any real place to do this, but I'm extremely concerned. I don't know whether there was an accurate portrayal of this in the news, but it seems like we're still struggling with the CPC relative to how much specifics we can give them. Even if we had an action plan in place, to budget for the imponderable is a conundrum that's almost impossible to address. If we're asking for money to have it available to jump on projects, and we're not at the position where we're actually soliciting offers for site plans, then there's no way to drill down to that kind of level. And if we're going to be held to that, the entire premise of what we're doing is going to go away unless we can flip properties to create some revenue. I'm just very concerned because they're going to be voting on that soon. It seems like people who would natively be supportful of affordable housing are balking at giving any money unless we give them a full-scale budget.
Judith?
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted Brendan and Larry, John did as well, the time it takes and the details that it takes to push any project forward. That my sense from reading that news article was that people on the CPC had expectations that things just go like turning on a light bulb. I don't know, do we need to go back and make some kind of presentation on how a property gets developed and what those steps are and what costs might be just on the development side before you actually build out a project? And then what it was, I don't, I don't know if the article did the meeting justice, and I haven't watched the meeting, but I was very concerned that they were not taking our proposal seriously.
So I'm going to jump in before recognize. Sorry, Judith, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I'm done. Thank you.
I wanted to jump in. First of all, Don, that was my other topic. So you handled it very well. Thank you for bringing it up. And Brendan, just before I recognize you, what I found out from last week, and I want to give a tip of the cap to our guest on the call today, the general public that joins us, Selectman Mary Anderson. And I'll defer to Selectman Anderson on her comments, but long story short, she advised me that members of CPC said that they had questions that were unanswered. And so I was not aware that an email was sent to me last week with a deadline today. But I'm going to put on the screen to show you what they consider to be the outstanding questions. And I'm hoping you folks can give some thought on it, but you've already done some of it. I will be responding to them ahead of their meeting this Wednesday, February 2nd. I don't know that it's going to be sufficient, but in any event, without further ado, here are the questions. It's related specifically to the CH5 that you can see there, which is I'll call it this way. You folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but the quote standard request for $500,000 each year from CPC for the Affordable Housing Trust. And so did the Housing Committee and the Board of Selectmen sign off on this request? I believe the answer is no, and I was not aware that they had to. Having said that, you all know, we all know from our joint meeting, Housing Committee has not been active for several months, and the Board of Selectmen have...
Sorry, that was Baby Ben.
That's all right. It's 2:00 in the afternoon. Weather and sports coming up next. The Board of Selectmen remains supportive of all efforts regarding affordable housing. And I think the best evidence of that was the actions at the special town meeting in October. So did they sign off? No, they did not. But I would hope that that's not a death knell, missing those. What is the strategy for the Affordable Housing Trust? I'm going to leave that for the rest of the group.
Bill, before you go further,
Go ahead. Yep.
statutorily, housing trust is not subordinate to the Board of Selectmen. It's a construct of the town where the Board of Selectmen supplies members. So I'm not sure whether they even understand what the structure based on that question. There is no vertical column that it has to go up.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that comment, and also add, nor is it the case with the Housing Committee. In fact, far less so, because as you said, the board provides membership. Housing Committee is meant to be a partner generally, as we've talked about. And it may also be that there was a reference in the application that we would be working with both Housing Committee and Board of Selectmen. So I'm going to verify that, but my statement would be that the Affordable Housing Trust continues to work through the Board of Selectmen as far as membership goes, but generally enjoys the support of the town generally on all matters for affordable housing. And most recently had a discussion with members of the Housing Committee while we wait for them to be fully constituted. Larry, you had your hand up?
I would, if moving forward, um, for the information and looking for acquisition, pre-development, site work, legal work, engineering, and marketing work, et cetera. If need be, I could put together a rough estimate of that for a budget for the next year or several years, and you can use it because, that's, I mean, it's only the back of the envelope, but nevertheless, I have a relatively good idea, and I can send that to Brendan, and he can tell me I'm out of my mind or I'm way short. But you could give them something. I wouldn't be too worried about that.
No, I would agree with the overall concept that we can absolutely have responses through the chair. To me, it was what you folks had already described. Newspaper article of previous meetings, and I'm a little bit flummoxed by it because, from my standpoint, we've been operating on all systems go and making headway on any number of priorities, not the least of which is affordable housing, insofar as the major purchase through the past chair and the recent actions of town meeting through the Board of Selectmen to support affordable housing.
Correct.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the kind of chronicling that I would think we would want to do, because number one, sitting here exactly a year ago, we had done one executive session to empower the chair to make an offer for a property that did not exist when we put the CPC application in that year. And now we'd be talking about future expense items to move along to develop it, but we still have to get the eminent domain portion of that finished. And having said that, we don't. All of the money gets vetted at the end because we have to give them reports about where it was expended. And if they're saying that it's not expended in the proper category, that's fine. But to rank prioritize them on their end would actually put them in a position where we need their permission to be able to go forward with a business plan, and that was never contemplated. We don't even have the action plan that would show us that we're requesting part of the money for, to show us where our priorities are, where we'd want to spend most of our time and money over the course of the near future. I had to have that conversation with them over a year and a half ago, and I don't think you were part of it, Jim. But if they wanted to opine on the validity of purchasing a particular property, they need to be on the trust as members. The CPC is not in the business of saying, no, I don't want you to buy that property. I want you to do this property. And I don't mean to sound hostile, but they're starting to get into operational stuff when they're starting to ask of what you're going to be spending on in the future. The whole point of a trust is, if you could know what it is that you're going to be expending over the next year, you could put it in an article on town meeting and you wouldn't need a trust at all.
Brendan?
Yeah, correct. And to Judith, thanks, Don, for that. But to Judith's point about trying to provide all this information about how, I don't think we have to do that. I mean, the goal is we're tasked to get affordable housing with CPC funds and other sources, but that's our goal. So that's why I think the most important thing here is, what are the funds going to be used for? And I think if we had to make a presentation, we could do that, but we need to look at each property. This is what we're doing. We just purchased the Marceline property for X amount of dollars. This is the goal. And we could do comparisons. That project in Yarmouth, I always bring up, where the town, I forget if they leased the property for 99 years, they gave it for $1, but they gave an additional $30,000 for each unit times 69. So for $2.1 million, they got 69 units. So can we present a business plan based on scenarios like that? Yes, but each property is going to be different. So I just think we just have to go through the properties and show them, this is what we're working on. These are the goals for each of these individual properties. It can be, and if we produce on one, maybe there's more properties down the road that can come to us and more funding. I was at a meeting one time with Christopher Clark, and someone on the CPC board actually mentioned that. It's like, well, once you bring a project to us, then we can approve it. It just doesn't work that way. There'd be no way to even do that. So unless we had all the money in the world just to buy properties and and present them individually, but it just wouldn't work that way.
Yep. Judith?
Mary, are you the liaison to the CPC?
I am.
You are done. Okay.
I've had this conversation with them.
Okay.
Larry, did you have a comment?
Larry?
Oh, that's fine.
Well, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just pointing out that we need to be able to have a coherent response, and it's not going to wind up being the money. We didn't even know 14 months ago that we were going to spend about 80% of our money on buying a property on Pleasant Lake Avenue. It wasn't even on the radar screen. That's
Well,
why we
again-
have money in contemplation of moving quickly on a project.
Well, for my purposes, this conversation was helpful because there is much that I can add to it. Again, whether they feel that answered their questions is another thing, but I feel that there's plenty of information that I can provide on behalf of the trust to tell them what we're doing, and we'll go from there.
Good.
Does it make sense for us to have a joint meeting? Is that usual for parties that have put in an application?
I don't know. I'd have to defer to others. I'm not aware that they've done joint meetings, but I also know that, again, the request came in middle of last week for answers that are due today, apparently for a meeting on Wednesday. So it's not that I've been invited to a meeting on Wednesday. It's that they're looking for content.
So they're deliberating.
Correct.
I mean, I plan on being at that meeting, Joe, but I just find it a little bit unseemly that they're acting as if they're in this kind of a position, that the town is here and they're up here. This is not a request coming from a 501c3 member or a committee in town. It's a request from an organization in the town that has fiduciary obligations, that can make fiduciary decisions. It's unlike virtually anything else other than the Board of Selectmen.
Right. Judith, did you have a question or a comment?
I guess I'm just wondering if another one of us should be there.
We'd have to cross
And,
post.
and, and my sense is, Don, that they're looking at this the same way they would look at, like, for example, if the library was looking to do some repair on the building.
Correct.
And that's an incorrect way of them looking at it, because we are this very different legal entity.
Joe,
All
you
right.
plan-
And do they have certain reporting? Do they have certain reporting that they need to meet?
Yeah, they
Well,
ask quarterly. They ask us quarterly for an account balance of what they've given and where it's been spent.
right, and I did present back in October in that regard. My understanding is that this isn't reporting. This is as they deliberate on applications.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it isn't customary, by the way. We did not get $500,000 out of the last year's. There was nothing given last year for general use acquisitions, and it was $250,000 the year before. Regardless of what we're requesting, they only gave us that one-time pop of $500,000. But that's gone. We got the Pleasant Lake property with that.
Right. This was helpful for me under item B. Like I said, I will get a response out to them. I'll share it with the trust, and if I hear anything, I'll certainly follow up with the trust. Again, if it weren't for Selectman Anderson, I wasn't even aware that there was a request in for information due today. So at least we can be compliant with that. Having said that, then, if you go on to item C, I think this is a positive development, if I can say it that way, meaning I heard our discussions that we had with members of the Housing Committee. and we were able to use that as a trust discussion. And so learning more of what I didn't know before, what you have in the packet, was all the information that we could pull together. And we got this because it was in procurement files. So the thought does occur to me that I'll go to the procurement files to see if I can find Bowler, just to have it as a point of reference. In any event, it's my understanding that the town, through the trust, in years past, had secured the services of J.M. Goldson for quote, an action plan for the Affordable Housing Trust. You can see in the packet the agreement that was reached. It's time-stamped November 25th, 2019, with a performance cycle of November 2019 through July 31st, 2020. I think that should have been June, but in any event, for a contract amount of $23,880. So that would have brought J.M. Goldson to the town. And you folks will know better than I, but it was my understanding that the use of that consultant and those funds was to develop a plan for affordable housing. So I'll open it up, but I have certainly the information I would need to do a procurement, other than what we think we would actually have to expend. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. I think let's start at zero and assume that the public doesn't know anything about this. That is not the same as the a yearly housing plan that we discussed at the Board of Selectmen. It's literally to create an action plan. We went more than a year operating with people coming in with their hands out saying, can you give us $100,000 for this, or can you give us $50,000 for that? We would have actually diminished ourselves with one of the property that we did buy ultimately. So we kind of put a pause on that. The action plan is supposed to give us an idea of what the community is looking to do and where the relative priorities of action should be. I've said a couple of them in the past, like rehabbing versus buying, building new. And got about 40% through with the action plan. They had started out by asking us to identify 5 icons of housing in Harwich over the last 25 or 30 years. They went to those people individually. I think Dick Gomes was one of them. Richard Wasteback was one of them. And they interviewed them about what Harwich had done and what their expectations for what Harwich would do. Then we got involved with a couple of workshops, one which I think Art came to as a member of the Housing Committee, where we had a strategy session. It was designed to come up with what our aspirations were internally. They started planning on external workshops, and then COVID hit. So we determined that it was really difficult to have public engagement without the public. Even today's electronic blips on getting us under the call is kind of evidence of that. We felt there wasn't really going to get us the engagement to create a foundational plan. So my guess is that they went about 40% of the way through creating a plan. So they've done some work through interviews and workshops. Where that is that the contract's period lapsed. They did not fill out fully, but then they're going to have, as far as I understand it, and this has to do with our reconnecting with some sort of procurement, they are also going to have to get, in addition to the money that was not spent, a certain amount more, because they're going to have to go back and redo some of the information as it is now stale. And that's my understanding of it. Is that helpful? I mean, to say what we've done and where we are?
It is helpful for me. What I was just going through is I do have the original, what I think are the original procurement documents, whereby the town had established instructions to bidders, even though it was for quotes. My question really is, if the trust members recall that process, was there anything different or new that you wanted to have included in the instructions? They're pretty straightforward. And then most importantly, you're going to always hear me say, most importantly, what's the value we would ascribe to that project? Meaning, I would imagine we would not expect it to exceed $50,000. And that's a hint because when you go past 50,000, you're into a whole different stratosphere.
10 to 50.
Yep. So if the members recall, was there anything you wanted to emphasize in this request for quotes? Otherwise, it's pretty much already written. We could release that fairly soon. There aren't a lot of affordable housing consultants out there. That's the bad news. The good news is we definitely know of at least 3 that we can send it to meet the procurement requirements. We must send 3. We only need 1 to come back.
I agree with Dawn. We're not going to exceed $50,000, and I think what we looked for before, I don't see it being dramatically different, except there's going to be less COVID.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Brendan or Judith, any comments?
None.
All right, so that is something I can assign immediately to procurement. It's going to be, like I said, a request for quotes, 3 firms. And as soon as we get one back, and of course, Goldson would obviously be on that list because that's sound business practices, because the town didn't have any issues with the consultant. Rather, the consultant ran into the little pernicious thing called pandemic.
Yeah, to be clear, we suspended the activities because we didn't feel like spending the money in that environment was going to be productive.
Thank you. All right, then if we're moving on, item D. So this is something that, again, Selectman Anderson was kind enough to bring to my attention. And I will tell you, I did take an executive action rather than wait for a trust meeting. Applications were due at close of business on the 19th, and we weren't meeting until the evening of the 19th. So what you have in your packet is an application that I did submit on behalf of the trust to the Mass Housing Partnership. And you can see that what they were looking for is if towns were looking to establish a trust, this is a grant that you could use over an 8-month period to help with the development of the trust. If you have a trust, what is it something that the trust would want to use the funds for? And so the emphasis was on community engagement, that we would be looking for this grant, if this technical assistance grant, if awarded, to help the trust on our critical assignment that I know we've talked about for months, if not years, on getting into a formal process of community engagement. With that, I'll open it up to the trust.
Joe, I think it's totally appropriate. I think that we might want to make a motion to ratify the submission so that it's on record that the trust itself was requesting that, and you were doing it on our behalf.
Thank you. That's item E.
Thank you, Mary.
Judith and then Larry.
I just want to volunteer to help with the grant writing if you need. Got a lot of experience in that. And until you have hired the assistant, I'll be happy to help if you need.
I'll
Thank you.
volunteer to help. I've got a lot of experience spending it.
Then thank you both for that. I will say that we met the requirements of the housing partnership. What they did indicate is, I believe next week they'll be reaching out to municipalities and applicants to follow up. So I think we're set as far as the application itself. To Don's point, item E. So this is the discussion of what was happening. Item E is for the trust to either affirm, deny, or take any other action. So unless there's anything else, we can go to item E, and the trust can weigh in on that.
Go ahead,
I'd like
Don.
to move that we support the application as submitted by our chair.
Second.
I can't second.
Yes, you can. We're all remote.
Oh, okay.
That's all right. Judith already got you. It's been moved and seconded to affirm the application that was sent in for Affordable Housing Trust Fund Intensive Technical Assistance Program. Any further discussion? Having said that, I'll try it on roll call vote. Don?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Judith?
Aye.
Brendan?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And I believe, Mary, did you have your hand up? Did you want to be recognized on this topic? All right. So that's 5-0.
That's the chair to stick his neck out and do this because it was really important to meet the deadline.
Absolutely. And again, thanks to Selectman Anderson for the heads up on that one. And I'm hopeful we can prevail because it would be a great use of technical assistance and it would just be a great way to really get into that critical discussion. Next item on the agenda, you have in your packets the Affordable Housing Trust financial transactions from inception of the trust through December 31st, 2021. Finance director indicated she was available, but I don't see her on the call. But I think the report speaks for itself and it's very straightforward. Any comments, questions, or anything with regard to the financial transactions report?
I move
All
it be
right.
published.
Say again, Larry.
I move it be accepted as published.
I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? I'll do roll call again. Larry,
Aye.
Judith,
Aye.
Brendan,
Aye.
Don.
I'll say aye, but I'm just questioning whether we have to vote on something that's empirically a report from the finance director. If we were requesting something or we're asking you to send it over to somebody, it'd be one thing, but it is what it is.
I don't disagree. I vote aye 5-0. But going forward, we are so minded. I agree with you, Don. Then it will be member updates. Before I get into member updates very quickly, I just want to remind everybody that after member updates, we will be going into executive session for the purposes stated, and we will stop the recording at that point. And just also want to advise the audience listening that our next meeting of the trust is scheduled for Monday, February 28th, 2022 at 1 p.m. and hopefully with any luck in the Griffin Room at Town Hall. Having said that, I'll open it up for member updates. Anybody have any updates?
No.
Larry, thank you. Judith? Brendan?
None.
None.
Thank you. Don?
The only thing I would say to wrap up what we've accomplished today is that someone, Joe, either you or Megan, should get back to Brendan about approaching Boland. So that
I'll
we
reach
put
out to
that
her.
on our radar screen.
Yep, I will update Megan at the conclusion of this meeting. I do have that in my notes and also in my notes to have the topic coming back on the 28th of February. Thank you, though. All right, if there's no other member updates, at this point, the chair is declaring that we need to go into executive session for the discussion that we'll vote on to go into in a moment. But this is the discussion regarding purchase, exchange, lease of real property. I declare that there's a detrimental effect to the public discussion. So then I'd look to Don to make a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Chair, I move that we go into executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21(6) to consider purchase, exchange, lease of or value of real property if the chair declares open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Selectman Anderson, did you want to say something?
I just want to find out if I should bow out of this meeting. I'm not part of the trust.
So thank you for asking. We would have booted you had you not left. We also will not record once we go in. So thank you for asking and thank you for joining us.
Bye, Mary.
Thank you.
See you tonight.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
This
We're-
conference is no longer being recorded. This
So,
conference will
I
now
would
be
ask
recorded.
Channel 18 to please remain.